I want to share with you today 5 lessons I've learned from a recent client meeting around getting a proof of concept underway to leverage AI. So my name is Peter and I help organizations with their journey around data analytics and AI. And I work for an IT provider in Australia and we're a large Microsoft partner. As part of that assistance is to really help connect business objectives of our customers and the requirements they have to a solution in the Microsoft space around data analytics and AI. And I'm in the scenario with a customer. We're about 3 to 4 meetings in around how they can leverage AI inside their business. Now, they've already been using a little bit of some AI tools. They've got something off the shelf for a particular use case around preparing some of their own sales collateral. And they're also using Microsoft Copilot for M365. And so they've got a little bit of familiarity with how some of these generative AI tools work. And so in this journey we've been on, we're looking at something a bit more refined to help some of their business process or people who operate their business. And the meeting started off, again, with a few meetings into the conversation around how do we scope the MVP, a minimum viable product for this first use case. Now, as part of the recent set of conversations, we've had a meeting with their chief operating officer. And that was really valuable to understand some of the, inner workings of their organization, some of the values they aspire to in terms of helping their customers, and some of the problems from that person's perspective around how they can increase the quality and the productivity of their team to provide a better outcome for the people they serve. And so some of these briefings had happened, and recently we had a whiteboarding session where we laid out one of these processes and actually looked for a number of focus areas or potential focus areas to then hone in on that we could then use to build a proof of concept MVP to get them started. But I had a meeting very recently and the conversation went a bit wild. There were new ideas, some data sets that we weren't kind of aware of that we're kind of bringing in, and what was all very interesting and important. At the end of the call, I sort of came away thinking we hadn't really progressed helping them get to that next set. And really, they were no closer to getting an outcome than when we had been, even though we felt we'd been moving forward. Still feels like they were, ideation is great, it's really important, it's good to iterate on that, but it just sort of feel like, well, you're asking for a proposal for the end of it, and we're kind of still going, hang on, we haven't really got the information we need. So I was just reflecting on this conversation and in terms of, why did it come this way? And I wonder if this is something that happens with not just in IT providers helping our customers, but even in your own organizations around how do you get progress on these sorts of things? What else is blocking advancements to do a AI proof of concept? So I want to share with you 5, lessons that I've come up with from that particular meeting and reflecting on that journey. And maybe there's something in here that will help you in your own initiatives. Again, whether you're maybe trying to champion this inside of your organization, or perhaps you are like me, you're trying to assist a customer of yours to do that. So I'll start with the first one. First lessons learned of walking away, reflecting on this experience to date, is we didn't do a good job defining the process up front and sharing that. So as we have a process we've been using for not just AI, but for other technologies as well. But that process, while clear up here, wasn't really well articulated to the customer in terms of what are the steps we need to get to so that we can help you scope something that is something you can then and you can think about, and if you feel like it's a good fit, go for it and sign off on. But there's still a distance from where we are now where that needs to be. And that was on me. I didn't do a good job articulating what are those pieces we need to do in order to be informed well enough to get to that point. So that's something that I think, it's always good to, on that journey, understand at least the high level, what are the things we need and how do we share that with the people who are engaged. Again, if you're inside your own organization, breaking down, an executive who wants to just do something, think about what other components might be required. The second lesson is around the education of AI. Now, this seems so simple, but it's actually quite complex. Now, for all the good that things like ChatGPT and Copilot M365 have done to bring AI into the forefront, those who've been around long enough will know that AI is a very complex topic. There are certainly other techniques and tools other than generative AI that can be used for that. What I feel is a problem is that as technologists, those who if you're listening to this, if you're familiar with technology over the last few decades, there's all sorts of different things you can do. Like, I like to use things like a recommendation engine, like your streaming service, like a Netflix, for example. They invest a lot of time to get your attention, to show you what's going to come up next when you finish watching a TV show or a movie, and keep you invested in their system. As just a really simple example. And that's not generative AI. That's a whole other set of machine learning, a classification, recommendation engine type of problem. But for business users, this is all very new for them. And so when they hear things like bots and agents and GPTs and what have you, it kind of feels it's lumped in together. So I think it's hard for them to tell apart what makes sense. And it's not their problem to solve, by the way. Their idea, they're to come and bring up the ideas and how can we move, advance, improve our business. But in this last spinning, we're getting too much into what it would do and solve, when rather than we've kind of got distracted away from, well, how are we helping, what problems are we actually trying to address, rather than focus on how they'll be solved. So there's, again, some work to be done on that. And that's an industry-wide thing. It's not just in the, on special technology providers. It's on everyone to be aware and educate. And I put it also onto a lot of the vendors when they market their products as well. In some cases, I think they do a probably subpar job and be able to show clarity around this when we think holistically around what's available, possible with AI. So talked about first thing was define processes. Second is an education piece. And they're things that certainly I know, reflecting on the things that we can improve when I talk to customers. The other thing I think went astray in this conversation is not having a vision for success. The people on this call were very excited about some of the benefits they would get, what it would mean for their business. But we're getting bogged down in kind of things that were not relevant, like how the interactions would be, or the data sets required. And there was no clarity on the outcome compared to the whiteboarding session, where we had some really, really good ideas and we need to try and narrow that down. We kind of went a bit astray with new ideas, which changes the vision for success in my mind. Because if you get clarity on that, then we can collaborate and build what does that good look like, and then what are the steps to achieve that. And it's so tempting when you get something, think about things new and shiny like AI, to be distracted by actually, to get the outcome, how do we center on that and focus on and use it as a measure to go, we know we've done a good job, we've validated a proof of concept, validated MVP, because we know we've hit this type of outcome, or at least learned something to work towards it. The fourth lesson learnt, and I deliberately didn't mention this in the prelude, But again, I didn't think about this till I was thinking about reflecting on the meeting, was we had some new stakeholders that hadn't been privy to some of the previous conversations. And in fact, one of the key stakeholders wasn't in one of the whiteboarding sessions either. And while there were notes and there were recordings and documents of the previous meetings, and they were shared, it was clear that unless they were engaged every step of the way or brought up to speed, then they're not part of the experience to date, which, as I said, we're kind of a few meetings in, and when you've got people coming in and out, they haven't been on the journey with the people, the core people between the customer and ourselves along the way, which is why it felt disjointed. So, unfortunately, something that I can control, and maybe again yourself can't control, but it's something we can kind of need to just gravitate and insist on, that if we're going to have people on board as part of the journey, let's make sure they're available. If they're not available, let's postpone that, because it's really important they stay part of it across it, not just have them skip a meeting because of other priorities. But let's delay that. And if other people come into the conversation, then we need to do a little bit of a setting of what's happened to date and be really clear about that, so that they feel involved. Their perspectives are heard, but they also got the context of everything happened to date. And if things need to change, that's perfectly fine. But I think when you don't have that level of engagement, then where you think you are, in the case it was in a recent meeting, to where other people are, they're not at the same steps of the journey. So making sure your stakeholders are all up to speed is really important. If you need to backtrack a bit, I think that's really important to do to make sure everyone's on the same page. And the fifth lesson that I think is probably something that kind of came out of this, just again to help center everyone, is probably having some guiding principles and constraints that needs to be shared by everyone. So if you're in an organization, I think this would be helpful to think about architectural principles, because in this conversation we had, we got quite expansive quite quickly, and suddenly all of a sudden this MVP we started off thinking about was trying to solve multiple problems and use cases, and in a way, there's also ideas being forced down to how things would work, when we're actually, with some of these approaches we need to take, while some things will be very simple to understand, some of the scenarios where the end users need to be part of are experiences we may not have to think about, need to be integrated into the way they work. And it's the essence of a MVP or a proof of concept, is to test these things and experiment with these things and validate an approach rather than being too prescriptive too early. So I tie that back to what I'm trying to say is having some guiding principles or constraints could be a good way to go. So a couple of examples on a constraint might be, in the case of this recent meeting, is all of a sudden we had about 5 or 6 data sets that would need to be involved. I'm like, well, you could do that, but all of a sudden there's a lot more work to do that. So how do we test the overall concept with a single data set and start there? And maybe one of those principles might be around, right, we're going to take small measured steps and validate in certain ways. And we don't progress thinking about those further steps or trying to solve those until we've learnt what those are. I might do a separate video on this because I've got some further ideas. But hopefully it gives you an idea of setting yourself up for success, not just with the vision, but also what are those guiding principles that you can ground yourself with to make sure everyone's on the same page. So I'd said I had 5 lessons, and they were the 5 lessons I came up with out of that meeting, but I've got a bonus one for you for having watched this far. And it was something that only came out after putting together the kind of thoughts for this video. And it was surprised me that, well, this is such an obvious one, is that we haven't actually connected with the end user. The best we've done is that Chief Operating Officer, which has an excellent idea of how people are working and the process. everyone mind that was kind of, I thought that was it, right? But as we're talking more about the problems and how people are working, we've made some assumptions, I think, around the conversations. And we can alleviate that through engaging with them, even as we define a proof of concept or testing a proof of concept. That's I think that's okay. But better would be to have them engaged to understand their ways of working at this early stage. So we know we're solving problems that matter to people, not what, no disrespect to the chief operating officer, but not what management think. What is impactful for I guess the knowledge worker in this case. And it's a balance of those two things, because there'll be important perspectives for both that is important to be balanced. So it's not always what I guess the knowledge worker might think it is, but also objectives of the organisation as well. So a well-rounded set of stakeholders is, I think, important. And then whenever we've done that in the past, always have, I think, much better successful outcomes. So let me recap the now 6 lessons learnt. I guess that hopefully, I said, you can take away when you're having conversations, if you're a technology provider like myself, with your customers, or maybe you are trying to do this inside your own organisation. I think these are all very valid. The first is having a process that everyone gets aligned to. Second, educate on AI, AI terms, and get a level set so everyone can understand, what is possible. Maybe show them some examples, talk about it. That's a really important part of the journey. 3 is create a vision for success. So get everyone, the key stakeholders, aligned to what outcomes they'd like to see and are required. 4, make sure consistency on stakeholders, and as stakeholders are added, make sure they're across everything to date, and they can be, I guess, involved as practical as possible, rather than maybe missing key things that have happened in the past. And one of those ways to help that is number 5, set some guiding principles around that. And lastly, for the 6th one, is engage other stakeholders to validate some of these thoughts and discussions. I mean, it's not practical to get every stakeholder engaged at all times, but I think it's an important part of a process to validate as you go. So I hope that was helpful. This is a bit of a longer video than I expected, but I think it was important for me to share some of those lessons learned, and hopefully you can take that away and advance your own AI initiatives. If you liked this video, please press that like button and be sure to subscribe for any further updates. And I'll see you in the next video.